Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. We are truly in uncharted waters right now with what's going on in Ukraine. Horrible. Every moment worse than the next. Horrible top to bottom. And, the reality is this isn't the weekend that Putin thought it was going to be, because he thought we're going to go in, it's going to be a quick weekend, we're going to come back, parades, kissing babies, all that stuff. They'll acquiesce. Hasn't happened. And look, people are suffering all over. People are dying in Ukraine. People are suffering in Russia. This is bad all around. We now see the economy that Russia had thought they were going to be inoculated from some of the sanctions. Their debt rating down to junk status. That was quick. We're talking only a couple of days and you're in junk status already. Because nobody seems to believe that they're going to be able to service their debt. The Russian oligarchs have already lost $80 billion. And it's no wonder you got one of them putting $1 million bounty on Putin's head. This Alex Kanahaneman, $1 million. And I saw this, I'm going, who's going to collect that? Who's going to try? But hey, this is what happens when you screw with the moneyed interests. Here in the U.S., Joe Biden and the Justice Department, they're beginning to go after the oligarchs here. There's new sanctions coming down, going to prohibit the oligarchs from traveling here, targeting their families and families down the line, preventing them from transferring assets out of their name into spouses or children's names, stuffs that they've done before. This is serious. In fact, the Justice Department announced that they are creating a task force specifically designated to go after billionaire oligarchs who have sided with Vlad, and they're going to make them hurt. And this is one of those moments where you go, uh-oh. If you're Vlad, uh-oh. Yesterday we talked about how Germany seized a billionaire's little boat. Today the story, France seized the yacht of another Russian oligarch. This one, a Russian energy oligarch, Igor II. His 280-foot little bathtub boat got snatched up. And maybe they're going to sell that off. Hopefully they will. There's a lot of cleaning up to do. And the thing is Russia had, the thought was they had built this financial fortress. They were going to be okay. They had like $630 billion in central banks, that they were going to be able to. It's all frozen. Everything frozen. Because I don't think Putin thought that the world this quickly, and this is, I got to tell you, this is Joe Biden. Because Biden took the intelligence early. He took it seriously early. He got out in front of it early, and he was preparing people. If you remember, he came out and said, hey, they're going to attack, and we know they're going to attack within a week. This is what's going to happen. And he was spot on. He read I know this is tough. He read the presidential daily briefings. He read the information. I know that's something that, wow, mind-blowing. But actually pulled the world together. And look how quickly the world has come together. And here's my problem with where we are. Get ready for what's going to come. Because the whole world now is going, yeah, well, except for those 5 places we talked about yesterday. Of which, 4 of them, I knew where they were on the map. The one I'm still trying to figure out. But get ready for the reality that Putin is going to have to provoke a wider war. He needs sympathy at home. Things not going well. And look how quickly things not going well. Early reports, not good for him. Mass protests in the streets, not good for him. You've already got an oligarch going, hey, I got $1 million for the first person to take him out. What? Quick. Now I hear people here. I have folks going, the U.S. or NATO or somebody should enforce a no-fly zone. We should get involved. No. We should do exactly what we've done. The entire world should condemn this. The entire world in unity should say, no, this is not how we do things. This is not something you're going to get a reward for, and we will not recognize this. I'm 100% opposed to the idea of enacting a no-fly zone, and here's why. Right now, Vlad not doing well. Public polling at home not so good. Even the rigged ones, what he's doing. The couple of the unnamed sources from inside the administration saying, hey, I can't resign because the only place I can resign to is jail, so they're not thrilled. So don't walk near any open windows there, Vlad. But what needs to happen for him is to see the outside world attacking Russia. He needs that because right now, the people of Russia are seeing exactly what we're seeing. The big bully, the mighty army with massive bombs and cluster bombs and rockets and all kinds of stuff, just bombing people who are literally in the basement making Molotov cocktails to stop a 40-mile procession of armored vehicles and military equipment. This is the ultimate David and Goliath. It's not even, it's not even David. It's like David with standing on one foot with both hands tied over his head, up to his eyeballs in water. That's how bad this is. And everybody's looking at it with the horror that it deserves, because there's one guy that deserves the world's scorn, and that is Vladimir Putin. And you want the Russian people to look at that and go, hey, yeah, him. He's responsible. The second you introduce NATO, the U.S. especially, or anyone else, the whole dynamic then changes. Now it's, oh, look, who's the evil Satan, or however you want to frame that. Which is why I think you had that incident the other day in Sweden, where there was a Russian, a Russian spaceship, a Russian, where there was a Russian plane that was in Sweden's airspace. I was going with plane and airspace, and it just came out almost a spaceship. But no, this is what I'm expecting. So make sure you mark that down. Also, interesting little tidbits real quick. If the goal was to make sure that no other countries go towards the EU and towards NATO, if that was the goal, we're worried about those former Russian states becoming more westernized and becoming more European and wanting to do what Ukraine now is going to really want to do. Georgia today formally announced that they are going to seek EU membership, as has Moldova. And look, they both got to be going, hey, how about that NATO thing? How about that too? Because we could use the help. And you want to make sure that everyone else falls in the line with NATO there, Vlad. Keep doing what you're doing. This is exactly the reason that countries are going, maybe we do need to be in with the rest of the international community. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I want to take a quick break. I got a lot to get to today. A little bit about the State of the Union, a little bit about this. A candidate's going to come on and talk about getting rid of John Kennedy in Louisiana. So much to get to. Going to take a quick break right here, right back. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs. in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the last time my next guest was on the program, we were talking about the Build Back Better plan, and at that time it was dead. Look, it was completely done. Manchin had basically stabbed us all in the heart and said, "You're not getting these investments because we're gonna feed the drug habits of people, and screw those kids because they'll get used to eating and that'll be bad for them." No, he didn't actually say that, but close to it. And this is where I think the State of the Union address kind of revived a little bit the Build Back Better plan, which I think is important, which is why I've asked Navin Nayek to come talk with us. Navin is the president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. If you want to check out their website, americanprogressaction.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can check that out. Navin, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure to be back.
So let's jump right into it. Thoughts on the speech?
I think overall it was a really strong moment for this president. I think, across the board on Ukraine, I think he looked, the way he needed to, which was very presidential, and really drew strong message against Vladimir Putin, and stood, I think, firm in terms of what the U.S.'s role is going to be on this. And then, I think the core of the speech in terms of domestic issues really was around the economy, both touting the successes of the last year, which have gotten way too little attention. And I think he tried to give that the sort of opportunity to lift it up. And then talking about how much more there is to do. And I think what was compelling in terms of Build Back Better specifically, and we're probably not going to call it that anymore officially, but he had a chance to reframe it really in the context of what the bill does in this moment, which is lowering costs for families. And I thought it was one of his best lines of the night, in fact, where, he acknowledged inflation is a problem and said there's, one solution is to lower people's wages. And, he basically came up with a better solution, which is to cut your costs, raise your wage, keep raising your wages and cut your costs. And so I thought that was an important thing. And I thought he really laid out the need for these provisions in Build Back Better without ever having to say those words.
Right. No, I think what he did is what I've been saying they should have been doing for the last year, is explaining exactly what it's going to do to make people's lives better. Lose the catch name, lose the numbers, say, hey, how are we going to make your life better? How are we going to make things easier? How are we going to make sure that you get child care so that you don't go broke? How can we make sure that, we get help if you need to take care of a loved one? How can we make sure that there's an infrastructure in place to make lives better, to get work done? And look, that's what I loved about the speech. He came in, he was positive. He delivered the goods, and he was on point.
Yeah, and I actually thought another really powerful moment was with that young boy in the audience, and reminding the American people that they can do something, that Congress, and really unfortunately it's just Democrats, can do something to lower the cost of something like insulin. I mean, that was a great moment where you remind the American people that insulin costs pharmaceutical drug companies $10 to make. But families are paying $300 or more a month. And we should just cap the cost of insulin, which is what President Biden's proposing to do at $35 a month. That's still a very healthy profit for the drug companies, huge margin. And what a savings for millions of families, whose lives depend on getting insulin. Yeah, I thought there were a lot of moments like that where he made it really tangible. And to your point, showed the American people how the policies he was proposing would really improve their lives.
And for me, again, I come back to that. And this is what I liked about the speech. It wasn't full of grievances. It wasn't full of, people are mean to me stuff. It was just going to get the work done. Show up, do the job. Wasn't fancy, wasn't flashy. Granted, I've said this a bunch of times. People are probably tired of hearing it. He's not Barack Obama. He's not Bill Clinton. He's Uncle Joe. He's going to go out there. He's going to make some gaffes. He's going to make some mistakes. He's going to trip over himself. But at the end of the day, it's the policy that I'm most interested in and the direction he wants to take us.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think really goes to this Uncle Joe sort of persona and demeanor, which is he's got a lot of heart, right? Like I think that really came across in the speech, not only when he was talking about his son, but when he was, the workers he lifted up, the stories he was telling, whether it was on prescription drugs or even around the war. This is a president who cares deeply and, is in this position for all the right reasons, because he actually wants to, position America better for the future and help working people actually have a shot to get ahead. And I think you're 100% right. He's not going to be remembered for sort of grand oratory or, these flowery turns of phrases. He's just going to be this president who really has cared about working people and is looking to give them a leg up.
No, it's one of those things that I've always said about him. He's just a guy who's going to get up every day, going to do the job and get the job done. And look, in this moment, especially with what's going on in Ukraine, calm, steady, focused leadership is what we need. Not loudmouth, bombastic morons pounding on the table. Good, solid, steady focus. I think that's the direction we go. Now, going forward here, because it's going to be a sales job, because, of course, you got Joe Manchin, minutes after the speech, basically throwing cold water on reviving the Build Back Better, or whatever we're going to rename this. Thoughts?
Well, I think initially he was not so positive, but he gave I thought a really encouraging interview yesterday afternoon to Politico, where again, there's no reason for him to do this. As you mentioned, the press corps basically believes the bill is dead. The conversation is all but stopped publicly for the last month. And yet he went to, sat down with a reporter and said, here are 4 things I can do. I can, cap prescription drug prices and let Medicare finally negotiate. I can, get corporate tax reform. It's time to actually ask corporations and the wealthy to start paying their fair share. And we can take those savings and invest it in a clean energy future and tackling the climate crisis. And then, the thing he cares about, obviously, on top of that, is putting money into deficit reduction. That's not obviously our top priority. There's a lot of other things we would really be interested in focusing on. But that to me is, again, if you had told me a year ago, when Democrats barely had taken over a 50-50 Senate, that in addition to everything that has been done, $1 trillion infrastructure bill, the American Rescue Plan that got this country vaccinated and cut child poverty in half, and on top of that, we might take on the pharmaceutical industry, we might make the largest investment ever in clean energy, and ask corporations and the wealthy to pay their fair share. I mean, that's a really powerful agenda. It's, again, short of everything this country needs and that working people want, but it opened the door to some really meaningful policy opportunities. And I think, I think the next month and a half is really the window in which we got to find out how serious he is and whether we can actually deliver that kind of change in people's lives, which would be huge.
No, we need to jump on this and quickly. And somebody should have grabbed him right then, grabbed him by the ear and taken him over to the Senate and gotten it passed through. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Navin Nayek. He's the president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. AmericanProgressAction.org, their website. You want to take a look at the work that they do. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast so you never miss a moment of the program. You can do that at thericksmithshow.com or anywhere where you get your podcast. Now, here's the thing, and I'm glad, Manchin finally a little bit on a couple of things, and this is where, the art of the possible. We need to get what we can get, and that has to happen soon. And then you work for the next bit of stuff. But what do you say to the people, Navin, who are going to go, well, we didn't get everything we wanted, and you're going to have people who are kicking and screaming because, the day after the State of the Union speech, every group that didn't get mentioned, wow, the collective whine that was there.
I mean, I think that is hard because there are a lot of problems facing this country, right? And I don't think it's to deny that. I think this president came in and laid out the challenges, not only on democracy, on racial justice, on climate change, and on the economy. He laid out some pretty serious crises facing this country. And I think, people have to remember there's only one party that's actually, A, acknowledges most of these problems, but B, is actually fighting to get some of these things done. And the only way, so that's the first thing. The second thing is we got to go and talk about what has been done. And I think not enough has been talked about the fact that, more jobs were created under this president in 1 year than any president, fastest economic growth in 40 years, some really big successes that are really important to talk to, wage growth. And so if we can get this done, I think it'll be a reminder that if you want to keep going, there's only one option, which is we need more Democrats.
No.
If we weren't stuck in a 50-50 Senate, you actually would have seen more of these things done. We would have gotten childcare done. We would have gotten home care done. We would have gotten the child tax credit extended. All these things, there's only one path forward, which is we need more Democrats in the Senate. There's not a single Republican that's willing to do any of these things right now. They've gotten so extreme and radical on their side of the party that, again, the majority of Republicans in the House and the Senate opposed a common sense infrastructure bill. I mean, they can't even vote for roads and bridges.
Isn't that incredible?
Communities. So, obviously we are a little disappointed not more is getting done, but a lot has gotten done. And there's only one path forward to keep this going. So we got to keep reminding people of that.
Yeah, and to your point on the other, we need more Democrats and insane Democrats who want to get things done. In the other half of the hour, we're going to have Luke Mixon on the program to talk about getting John Kennedy out in Louisiana because we need to get rid of some of this dead weight in states that are winnable. Because look, Louisiana is a state that needs investment, and climate change, kind of a big deal in that state, I would think.
Yeah, and then, there's so many. Same thing in Florida. Look at that. That's a state similarly where you have these huge problems. Climate's a great example, barreling down on these states. And not only do they not want to do anything, they're actively trying to make things worse. That's the thing that's become really, the Republican Party really has changed in the last 5 years. They've always been the party of big business and of corporations, but they've really become the extreme MAGA party right now, where the only thing that matters to them is actually getting power. And they're not interested in getting power to help working people. That their goal is to actually get power to reward their friends and punish their enemies. And that's sort of, what does Kevin McCarthy put out as an agenda? Not a single thing other than he's going to strip a bunch of Democrats he doesn't like of their chairmanship. That is the agenda they have offered. And then even more frightening, because it's concrete and scary, last week, Rick Scott, the head of the Republican Senate Committee, put out his plan, which would end Social Security in 5 years. It would raise taxes on 75 million households, including, nearly 2/3 of seniors in the country, right? Like, they really do have a radical agenda. And if you're not with them, they're just looking to get power. They'll do anything to get power, and they're going to use it to punish people.
No, you're absolutely right. And the important part there, punish people, because these folks are just plain mean. I don't know where else to come up with it. But Navin, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing some thoughts. Hope you'll come back and talk with us again. Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good stuff. Navin Nayek. He is the president and the executive director there at the Center for American Progress Action Fund, AmericanProgressAction.org. Check that out. Good stuff there. Also, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast there at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. National headlines spread fear of the growing wildcat strikes at Chrysler and Briggs auto plants in Detroit. The Wildcats had increased to 35,000 strikers and idled workers at 2 Chrysler plants and 7 Briggs plants. The strike wave started a week earlier at the Dodge main plant in Detroit. 8 of the union's best leaders had been discharged for refusing to go along with a production line speed-up. Briggs management followed Chrysler's union-busting campaign by firing 7 UAW officers at the Mack Avenue plant. 3 days later, Briggs fired another 8 committeemen and stewards, which then provoked the walkout. Company officials and the War Labor Board were outraged at the halt in war production of tanks, B-29 Super Fortresses, anti-aircraft guns, rockets, and trucks. The Michigan legislature introduced a bill to define as a felony any strike participation that violated a labor relations contract. The War Labor Board demanded that both sides meet in Washington to end the walkout. Strike leaders defied the wartime no-strike pledge and ignored the international's threat of disciplinary action. Strikers had the full backing of local UAW presidents. The UAW conceded that management had provoked the wildcatting through indiscriminate firings. Workers argued that if the War Labor Board prioritized production over union busting, they would order the reinstatement of all the discharged leaders. The Flint Labor Council passed a resolution demanding that all CIO and other union representatives resign immediately from the War Labor Board. It considered the board as stacked against labor. Workers at Chrysler and Briggs would soon end their walkout with guarantees of arbitration for reinstatement of the fired militants.
Our local newspapers are being merged, purged, shrunk, shut down, and looted by Wall Street profiteers. Yet, there's good news. In the towns those media vultures are torching, a phoenix is rising. Hundreds of determined locals, often led by people of color, are finding new ways to pay for and revive top-quality local journalism. For example, the Ferndale Enterprise moved to an old Victorian home, renting upstairs rooms to vacationers to subsidize the paper. Also, while aloof Wall Street owners have no connection to us or our towns, the scrappy new community papers are stressing their grassroots connection by moving into friendlier, more central, street-level spaces such as public libraries and community centers, so that regular people can see them and have direct access to their reporters and editors. Then there's the editor of the Sahan Journal in Minneapolis, who moves his weekly editorial meeting to the offices of various grassroots groups so their members can help shape the paper's coverage. And in Marfa, Texas, the Big Bend Sentinel is literally serving the public, not only with a good weekly, but also with the Sentinel, a combo coffee shop, cozy bar, cafe, event space, and hangout for locals to meet and greet. In ways big and small, dedicated local journalists are experimenting with funding, structure, staffing, etc. to produce the news that democracy requires. Note to Wall Street vultures, these newspaper ventures aren't interested in scaling up to maximize investor profits. As they know, it was corporate cost-cutting, consolidation, and scaling that got us into today's mess of journalistic collapse. And, unlike the Wall Street model, their success is not measured simply by financial return, but also by how they do at keeping citizens informed and engaged. This is Jim Hightower saying, now that's real journalism.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So to pick up on what Navin said, and look, and I've been saying this for a while, we need more pro-worker Democrats in the Senate, in the House. We need more working family-friendly politicians at every level, state legislature, state rep, state senator, dog catcher. I want worker-centric people in every position. And it starts with every election and voting for the people who have decided they're going to jump in the middle of this. And then, you know what? Throwing some of the bums out. And I look at Louisiana. You got incumbent John Kennedy there, who has a lifetime legislative score of a whopping 14% with the AFL-CIO, which means that virtually all of the issues that are important to you and me and working people across this country, Senator Good Old Boy has been against. All of the things that Wall Street and corporate America wants, well, you know where he's at. He's popular. Look, he's popular. He's got that oh shucks kind of delivery, the one-liners, some of them quite clever. Give him credit. Credit where credit is due. But clever doesn't keep the lights on. Clever doesn't keep a roof over their head. And the reality is we need somebody who's going to get in there and fight for people. If there's a bill that was going to make a workplace less safe, John Kennedy voted for it. If he's going to encourage wage theft, he voted for that too. I want somebody who's going to vote the other way. That's why I've asked Luke Mixon to come talk with us. Luke is a candidate down in Louisiana for U.S. Senate. someone I think that could be interesting in this race. You want to check out his website, LukeMixon.com. We'll get links out on social media. Luke, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, Rick, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with John Kennedy's labor record. Let me start there, because as a labor guy, that's the first thing I look at. As anyone, I looked at you. First thing I saw, union member, good thing, Air Pilots Union, good for you. What's John Kennedy's record?
Yeah, you mentioned it. His record has been abysmal for working people down here in Louisiana. You mentioned my experience in a labor union. Look, I was a military guy before that. I always say in my time in the military, I was proud of it. We were organized, and there was labor, but it was certainly not organized labor. And now joining the Airline Pilot Association, I'm proud to be represented by an organization that fights for my wages, fights for my sick time, my vacation, my retirement. And, that relationship that I've seen between my union and my company has really been beneficial, not only for the workers, but the customers we serve and the business. And I'm really proud to be a part of that. I'm proud to receive a lot of support from the labor unions here in Louisiana. And I'm confident that I am absolutely confident I'll represent hardworking people better than Senator Kennedy has.
So the difference stark, the difference night and day, because I hear a lot of people say, well, there's not much difference between Democrats and Republicans. Here's an issue very different, right?
Absolutely. He and I could not contrast more on this. And you mentioned about turning the lights on as well, and how Senator King, you said, hey, credit where credit is due, and he has his quips every once in a while. I can tell you a group of people that are not real interested in Senator Kennedy's quips, and that's people of Southeast and Southwest Louisiana. Look, our state gets devastated by these once-in-a-generation storms. They seem to hit us just about every year. I was in Lake Charles recently, where in the last year they were devastated by 5 disasters, to include 2 hurricanes, a flood, an ice storm, and then COVID. And after 420 days, they had still not received any funding from the federal government, because leaders like Senator Kennedy have not found, instead of fighting for those people, they instead get on cable news and give their funny quips, which do no good, absolutely no good for the people down here.
Yeah, Senator Kennedy doesn't seem to run out of time for Fox News. I see him on all of the crazy channels. Because, look, he's a good character. I mean, honestly, and I think he's got a career there. That's where I'd like to see him go. I think he's entertaining, a little off the beaten path, but that's a good place for him, not in the U.S. Senate.
Well, you mentioned it. He has his character, right? But it's a character without principle. It's a character without core. He started out as a very liberal Democrat, and he has gone through the entire progression. He went through being a moderate Democrat to a moderate Republican to a right-wing Republican to now, well, I can't really describe what that is other than a person who does not represent our nation well, a person who does not represent my state well. I'll give you a couple of examples. He is the only senator up for re-election in 2022 who voted to overturn the election. And, as a military member, as an American, I just can't stand for that. I love this country. I'm proud of what we've accomplished. And we cannot have people spitting in the face of the very democracy that my friends and I fought so hard to defend. And look, the same can be said for what we're seeing right now overseas in Ukraine. I'm sure if you asked him right now, he would be very pro-Ukraine and very anti-Russia. But as recently as 2019, he spent July 4th in Russia. As recently as 2018, despite the intelligence community repeatedly saying this was a falsehood, he spread the Putin propaganda that it was Ukraine and not Russia that meddled in our 2016 election. So he's been on both sides of every issue, to include our democracy right here at home.
It sounds just like Fox News. I mean, to be honest, that's a good place for him to be, would be right there. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Luke Mixon. Luke is a candidate for Senate there in the great state of Louisiana. You want to check out his website, LukeMixon.com. Now let's talk a little bit about that, because I got to tell you, 4th of July, going to Russia. There's a lot of symbolism there. There's a lot of things that I don't know. It seems like a bad idea. I know that they're supposedly the party of waving the flag and they're standing for the national anthem and all that stuff. That just seems to me, I don't know, the wrong message.
Absolutely. He was meeting with Foreign Minister Lavrov, who is now an internationally sanctioned war criminal. He is the foreign minister who is responsible for a murderous tyrant in the form of Vladimir Putin invading a foreign and sovereign nation. Like, we're seeing the people of Ukraine absolutely fighting for their lives, fighting for their freedom right now. It's remarkable to see what they're doing. I'm really inspired by them. And certainly I support us, United States, enforcing every economic sanction we can against Russia to stop what's happening. And certainly we need to continue arming the Ukrainians so they continue to fight for their freedom and for their lives, for their children.
So let me ask you this, as a military person, someone who's served our country, are you in favor of anything beyond the sanctions that we're doing and going in that direction? I have some people who are saying we need to enforce a no-fly zone. We need to do all of this stuff. I'm opposed to that, and I've got reasons why, and we can discuss that. But I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, you mentioned so I graduated from the Naval Academy 109 days before 9/11. I graduated on May 25th, 2001, and that one event, September 11th, shaped the entirety of my career. I ended up being an F-18 pilot. I completed 4 combat deployments, flying off aircraft carriers in support of our operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and most recently in 2014 and 15 in Syria. And you're right about the no-fly zone. Sometimes we say that like it's some very simply executed thing, and it's not. It's a difficult thing to do, and I can get into all the details of that. But certainly, Russia is a significant threat. Their surface-to-air threats, their air-to-air intercept there. It's a lot of things to think about. It's not as simple as just saying, "Hey, we'll throw up a no-fly zone." And I do not support sending U.S. troops into Ukraine right now, but I certainly support U.S. troops in the neighboring countries. And again, I support exhausting every economic and diplomatic solution to this problem before any military resources. And we have to remember, a lot of times, Americans, we have become a little bit complacent with war in that we've been in one for the last 20 years. But we have to remember that when we talk about armed conflict, it is never simple. It is never easy. These are America's sons and daughters. These are brothers and sisters. These are moms and dads. And we have to be careful with what we say because words have importance.
No, absolutely. But I mean, between you and me, I'm an anti-war person. I believe the Smedley Butler thing. It makes poor people dead and rich people richer. Now this is an interesting scenario because you have one rich guy, Vladimir Putin, sending poor and working class Russians into Ukraine to kill poor and working class Ukrainians. That is very simple, cut and dry to me. That has to stop, and there has to be someone punished for that. So for me, this seems very simple. Or do you see it differently?
No, I see it the same way. And look, we have to remember that a threat to freedom in Europe is not something we can ignore, right? We cannot have this attitude like that doesn't concern us. We're just going to stay away from it. It does concern us, and there could certainly be a time when military action would be required, which we can't stand by. And absolutely, if when we were attacked on September 11, 2001, NATO countries came to our aid, and if a NATO country was attacked by Vladimir Putin, he should be met with overwhelming force, and that I will firmly stand by.
What do you say to the argument? Because I've been getting a lot of this, especially from the left, that, Putin's not wrong for this because, Ronald Reagan said we're never going to expand NATO or some logic along that line, that NATO was never going to expand or should have been disbanded after the fall of the Soviet Union or whatever the latest excuse is. I'm curious your thought.
I'm sorry, could you say your question one more time?
Yeah, the argument on the left is that we shouldn't be involved in this at all. That Putin has his excuse. His excuse is that we were never supposed to expand NATO. There were never supposed to be additional countries. They're supposed to be disbanded after the fall of the Soviet Union. So Putin is not wrong here, and I disagree with that.
Oh, of course, absolutely, I disagree with that. A lot of the same rhetoric, hey, we shouldn't be involved, was made. A lot of those same people there were arguments made for that in 1939 when another murderous tyrant was taking over Europe. And there is a time and place when America has to be involved. Look, we are this. I love this country. We are this nation of ideas. We stand for freedom and justice and equality and democracy. And frankly, those are things that Senator Kennedy has found himself on the wrong side of recently. But we are this great country. We are this country that survived the Depression and world wars because of the grit and determination of our greatest generation. We are this country that triumphed in our quest for civil rights because of people like Dr. Martin Luther King, and that is worth fighting for. It is worth standing up for both at home and abroad. And unfortunately, we have seen my very own Senator John Kennedy, on the wrong side of that, both when he voted to overturn our election on January 6th and in his propaganda saying that it was Ukraine involved in meddling in our election. I have a really hard time seeing Zelensky being blackmailed by the American government. He doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's open to blackmail. He strikes me as a hero.
No, and look, to be honest, for a guy who was a comedian and a TV star, to stand up to both of the most powerful leaders in the world, first Donald Trump when Trump was twisting his arm to dig up dirt on Biden, and now literally with the I need ammunition, I don't need a ride line. Props, legend.
Right.
This is something legends made out of.
He's an inspiration. He's such a courageous figure, and he's proven what leadership can do because the Ukrainian people are fighting. They believe in him, and he's a real inspiration. And I've certainly the American we must come to we must help him. And let me be clear, in forms of arms and in terms of economic sanctions, we really need to help him out right now and his people.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Luke Mixon. Luke is a candidate for Senate there in Louisiana. I'll get it. LukeMixon.com, the website, if you want to help out. Make sure you got a donation. Always need them. I was looking at the money. Kennedy's got like $11 million in a unholy war chest, to use one of his lines. Going to need a little bit to help that out. So LukeMixon.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast if you missed any of the program. Here's the other thing that's in this for me. I'm looking at January 6th because you brought it up. The fact that this guy is, all in favor of, it was all rigged. Basically, Donald Trump's water boy. And what's frustrating is I saw the president on with Maria Bartiromo, and she asked him when Trump expected China to invade Taiwan, and his response was, quote, I do believe it. She said sooner rather than later. And he said, I do, because they're seeing how stupid the United States is run. They're seeing that our leaders are incompetent. Of course they're going to do it. This is their time. Can you imagine, and this is in politics. Can you imagine in a moment of any time in our history where a former president on the brink of war would say something like that, almost encouraging a foreign adversary to do something that we all are concerned and fearful of? I mean, can you imagine that?
President Trump and I have some just fundamental disagreements on character and patriotism, and it requires, when you have people who say things like that, it requires leaders with patriotism to do the right thing. It requires people to put country before party. And Senator Kennedy had that opportunity. And look, Rick, we all have these opportunities in life, right? Where there's a right thing to do, and then there's the politically opportunistic thing to do. And he had that opportunity on January 6th. I'm certain, look, Senator Kennedy, as you said, give credit where credit's due. He's a smart man. He has degrees from Vanderbilt, and a law degree from Oxford and University of Virginia. He's a smart man. Despite 60 court cases confirming that we had a free, fair, and accurate election, despite a violent mob storming the Capitol, he still could not find the moral courage. He still could not find the patriotism to do the right thing. Instead, he chose what he determined to be the easy thing, or the door of political opportunity, and he voted to overturn the election of the United States of America. I cannot think of anything less patriotic than that. And, I'm running as a Democrat, and I'm proud of that. But I'm also running as someone who wants to get back to civility, wants to get back to putting American workers first, wants to get back to putting country over party. And I'm really proud of the campaign we're running. We're going to hold Senator Kennedy accountable for his lack of moral courage, for his lack of patriotism.
Outstanding. You just jumped ahead of my next question, which was to kind of lead this in the direction of why would you want to do this? You had things going well. You got a good job, good union job. Life was going in a good direction. You got the family, a beautiful family. Why do you want to throw yourself in this fishbowl? And you just undercut me.
The answer. Yeah, it's the answer, and I'll keep it simple because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do, and I always say if you have a problem, don't just do something about it. And I have a problem with the way politics are in this country right now, and I'm determined to do something about it. And I certainly thank you for letting me be on your show. It's a really great opportunity for us.
Last question I got for you. How can people help? How can we help you? How can we help Luke Mixon become the next U.S. Senator from Louisiana?
Yeah, you mentioned it. Please visit LukeMixon.com. If you can, make a small donation to our campaign. We'd really appreciate it. And please help spread the word about us. And again, thank you so much for having us.
Good stuff, Luke. I appreciate the time, man. Best of luck to you.
All right, Rick. Thanks again.
Great stuff. LukeMixon.com, the website. Make sure you take a look at that. We'll get links out on social media on how you can help that out. And look, I think Luke's a great guy, and I wish him the best in this. Let's take a quick break right back after this. Again, if you're just now joining us, make sure you grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com or, on your favorite podcast platform, from iHeart to iTunes to Podbean to Stitcher and everywhere in between. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that William Greene, longtime president of the American Federation of Labor, was born in Coshocton, Ohio. Greene's family were English and Welsh immigrant miners. He entered the mines at the age of 16. Before he was 20, he had become secretary of the Coshocton Progressive Miners Union. That local would eventually join the United Mine Workers of America. By 1906, Greene had risen to lead the Ohio chapter of the UMWA. Less than 2 decades later, when longtime leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, died, Greene was named his successor. Greene believed in union management cooperation. He thought labor could win more gains at the table with management than they could standing in opposition. Greene helped secure some major legislative victories for labor, including the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, which strengthened collective bargaining rights. He also supported the Fair Labor Standards Act, which established the 40-hour workweek and the minimum wage. His tenure at the helm of the AFL was during some of the most tumultuous years in U.S. labor history. This was an era of massive sit-down strikes and organizing drives for workers in industries like steel, meatpacking, and the auto industry. Greene supported organizing industrial workers, but the AFL's leadership at the time, by and large, favored skilled trade labor. Increasingly, Greene clashed with UMWA President John L. Lewis over the question of industrial unions. This led to a split in the labor movement and the formation of the separate Congress of Industrial Organizations. Greene continued to lead the AFL until his death in 1952. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
One of the things I did want to get to with Luke is the fact that John Kennedy in Louisiana there, a guy who was against that theory about race or critical something or other, all against that, no, can't possibly talk about that theory, because he riled people up with that boogeyman, but has just come out with Senate Bill 3679 titled Crucial Communism Teaching Act. It's crucial. It's not critical. That's the difference. If it were critical, then there's something to be upset about. Oh boy, critical, oh boy. But this is crucial. Crucial as opposed to critical. Different way of thinking about it. Crucial Communism Teaching Act. And what this is supposed to do is it's supposed to browbeat children to think that, to ensure that they know that communism and socialism is bad, so that when we start talking about policies that help we the people, and they use that word, we immediately start to to foam at the mouth and drool all over ourselves and run screaming because, oh my gosh, communism, socialism, communism. Yeah, that's them. It's not going to go anywhere. Again, this is one of those things. It's the symbolism to let you know that he's American, and they're going to make sure they put those people in their place. I do find it interesting, the guy that's running against Luke, because they have a weird thing in Louisiana. They all run as, in a big jumble, and on election day, whoever gets 51%, that's who it becomes, and whoever doesn't, they got runoff voting down the road. If I'm remembering this right, they've got another election down the road after that. If no one gets 50%, the top two then have a runoff. So they don't do the party thing like a lot of states do. But this is about making sure that everyone knows he's against that theory, but he's okay with the critical, the crucial thing. He's against the critical for the crucial. Just quite remarkable. But hey, we can't teach actual history, just have to fear people. Good news today, the New York Times tech workers, they certified their union overwhelmingly. About 80% of the ballots in favor of creating what is now, I guess, the largest tech union in the country to have collective bargaining rights. The vote was 404 to 88. That is a sizable victory, easily reaching the majority needed. Now the fun begins, negotiating the first contract. And this is where, again, we need major labor law reform to ensure that actually happens. Because sadly, a lot of places you win an election and then they drag it out. You spend months arguing over where the apostrophe goes, or where to put the comma, or if we should cross T's or not, if there should be an E at the end of the word to save printing costs or not, without ever talking about the real issues, which, again, I think we need major labor law reform. And good news also on the law reform front. President Biden today signed the Ending Forced Arbitration Act for women and sexual harassment in the workplace. This landmark piece of legislation would end the forced arbitration stuff that goes on when you're talking about sexual harassment and assault claims. Now, everything else, oh no, corporate America is very happy. Don't worry about it. Everything else. But this is a start. This is a start to ensure that in the workplace, sexual harassment and assault claims don't just get thrown to an arbitrator and, well, we know what happens then. The studies are already conclusive. Companies win overwhelmingly in those places. Why? Because the person who's the arbitrator, they know which side the butter is on. They do, and they're not going to screw that up. So good to see that the president signed this. And the next step for me, doing away with forced arbitration clauses altogether. Now, here's the other side of this. As a union guy, I almost don't care about this. Now, I just said I do, and I do. I want to see it go away. I think it's important that it does. But as a union guy, someone who believes in contracts, these forced arbitration clauses never got into a union contract. Didn't happen. And I've told the story about a relative who worked for a company for 25 years. The boss came in and said, sign this or there's the door. And in that moment, she had to give up all of her rights to protections or lose her job. This a beginning of chipping away at that. And again, this is our Supreme Court. This was a horrible series of decisions by a corporate Supreme Court that has allowed the pendulum to swing way too far to the side of corporate America. Good stuff. Very happy this has happened, and good on the president for signing it. Now, like I said, it's time to do more. And I'd like to see the PRO Act, as he brought up in the State of the Union address. All really good stuff right there. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break right here. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. We want to make sure everyone grabs a hold of the podcast, never misses a moment. You can get it anywhere where you get your podcasts, from iHeart to iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, all around and everywhere in between. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We're done talking about infrastructure weeks. We're now talking about an infrastructure decade.
Biden touts infrastructure and clean energy in State of the Union address. Majority of Americans willing to shoulder higher gas prices to help Ukraine. Plus, another big oil giant pulls out of Russia.
Are they American?
Yes.
Well, God bless America. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Germany shutting down the pipeline led former Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev to tweet about the high-priced natural gas they'll now face. Welcome to the new world where Europeans would soon have to pay 2,000 euros per 1,000 cubic meters. Whoa, that is a lot. Or a little. The metric system means nothing to me.
Ditto. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the tragic, terrible, awful impacts of what we're seeing in Ukraine are bad enough. Add to that now the economic impacts around the world.
Yes, indeed. Although it may ultimately hit Russia the hardest, its oil and gas industry is getting pummeled. Oil giant ExxonMobil announced that it is joining Shell, BP, and other oil majors in announcing it will exit its role in a major Russian oil and gas project and cease any new investments in the country following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Well, that took long enough for Exxon.
Yep, and Norway's $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, the world's largest, will also divest its Russian assets.
Ouch, that's going to leave a mark.
And the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is now dead. The Russian-owned operator declared bankruptcy and let go all of its employees.
Sad.
Here in the U.S., the Biden administration says it will tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to ease gasoline prices. Lawmakers from both parties are pushing the White House to ban imports of Russian oil. But industry analysts say it may be unnecessary because Russia's oil exports are already taking a major hit from the oil company's exit.
Also sad.
A new Reuters poll found a majority of Americans, nearly 60%, said that paying more for fuel and gas because of the crisis in Ukraine was worthwhile to defend another democratic country. That's up 10 points from last week.
So nearly 60. The other 40 are just, they want cheaper gas, no matter how many people have to die for it.
Russia's war on Ukraine was a major focus of President Biden's wide-ranging State of the Union address on Tuesday, but he spoke only briefly on climate change and environmental justice. It was a missed opportunity to inform Americans about the necessity of swift climate action in the wake of a new UN report this week that climate impacts are more severe than expected and governments are running out of time to adapt to worse effects to come. Biden instead touted the infrastructure law, the largest infrastructure investment in U.S. history, and the jobs that come with it.
We're done talking about infrastructure weeks. We're now talking about an infrastructure decade. It's going to transform America.
Biden didn't mention the Build Back Better Act that was sabotaged by Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Instead, he touted executive actions he's taken to rebuild domestic manufacturing and a flood of new projects from the infrastructure law.
We'll create good jobs for millions of Americans, modernizing roads, airports, ports, waterways, all across America. And we'll do it to withstand the devastating effects of climate change and promote environmental justice. We'll build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Begin to replace the poisonous lead pipes so every child, every American has clean water to drink at home and at school.
Biden also called on Congress to pass elements of the stalled or dead Build Back Better Act with investments that would boost the economy and lower long-term inflation and costs for working families.
I call it building a better America. Let's cut energy costs for families, an average of $500 a year by combating climate change. Let's provide an investment tax credits to weatherize your home and your business, to be energy efficient and get a tax credit for it. Double America's clean energy production in solar, wind, and so much more. Lower the price of electric vehicles, saving another $80 a month that you're not going to have to pay at the pump. Folks,
surprisingly, Biden didn't mention that last week the Interior Department's first offshore wind lease sale shattered records for offshore energy development. It was the nation's highest-grossing offshore energy lease sale in history of all types of energy, including oil and gas. The New York and New Jersey region is setting up to be a wind energy manufacturing hub, showing how a clean energy and climate agenda can boost domestic manufacturing and create jobs while tackling climate change.
Nice. nice. Very nice indeed. You got to give credit to Joe Biden. He's still trying. And, of course, Joe Manchin is still going to be blocking him. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, I'm still hung up on this Maria Bartiromo's question, and Trump's going on about China. I'm still struggling with this because she asked him, and as I said before, she asked, "Do you expect China to invade Taiwan sooner rather than later?" Like this, in her view, it's a foregone conclusion, gonna happen. And his response is, "I do, because they're seeing how stupid the United States is run." You know, really, in a moment where the world is at conflict, this is what the former guy comes out with. Just insane. But hey, look, this is the guy who said Putin was smart and genius and savvy and very savvy. Crazy. Here to share some thoughts on where we are and just how nuts all this is, I've asked our good friend Fred Wellman to come talk with us. Fred's the co-founder of the Beerhall Project. Fred, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be back, Rick. It's great to see you.
So I'm looking at this and I'm going, I don't know what happened to Maria Bartiromo. I remember her as a business reporter who was always very good, very factual, very on point. Now she seems as loony as that Janine Pirro.
Yeah, it's that whole, there's a whole arc to it now, right? Where some level-headed people turn into fire-breathing converts to the Trumpist ways. It's been, and you see it in the media, you see it in these talking heads, and of course you see it in politicians. Like here in Missouri, we have Eric Schmidt, who by every measure was a normal, easy to work with bipartisan Republican, and now is down at CPAC, suing school districts here in Missouri. And there's a weird conversion that goes into being dedicated to the cult, and you got to be all in. Otherwise, you're not fully a member of the cult. You're all in, like she's gone.
No, it's that loyalty thing, and you go back to, some of the crazier times. And I liked one of your Beerhall Project tweets today about Hitler. You wrote, "Hitler absolutely adored Mussolini. It was so over the top," you said, "it actually made him uncomfortable, and he avoided Hitler for years because it was weird. History has a way of repeating itself." Are you saying that our former president has a thing for Putin? Is that where you're going up with this?
I think he's a super fan, man. It's just weird. Just the way he talks about the guy. There's the folks at the Republican Accountability Project put out a great ad today, talking, really showing all the ways that Trump speaks about Putin, and he's savvy, he's so smart. He waits after the Olympics. It's brilliant. It's just, I don't know, man. It makes me uncomfortable sometimes. But either way, it's just completely inappropriate for someone who is the president of the United States to be so adoring of a dictator from Russia who is currently conducting an illegal war where he's slaughtering civilians and causing danger to the entire world. It's mind-boggling. But yeah, that's a historic fact. Hitler was a huge Mussolini fan. He modeled his brown shirt essay. The brown shirts was a takeoff on the black shirts of Mussolini. The Beerhall Putsch was a model of Mussolini's march to Rome. The old goal was to take over Bavarian's government and then walk to Berlin at the head of his column of brown shirts. And of course, it didn't work out so well for him. But Mussolini kind of kept him at arm's length. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, in her book Strongmen, talks about it extensively. The very first part of her book about the strange alignment of these fascist movements in the 30s and the 20s.
Yeah, but the thing that gets me is, and this is where I'm struggling, because you said a moment ago, the guy in Missouri was at one point sane and rational, made this bizarre, this bizarre shift. I just talked with a guy who's running for Senate in Louisiana. He was talking about John Kennedy, who at one point was a solid Democrat, and then a little bit more moderate Democrat, then turned to a Republican, then and now full flipping lunatic. I guess we better figure out what's in the water.
It's naked ambition. I thought with a lot of it. Let's be honest. I think what's happened is you could be pretty ambitious politicians back in the day and not have to be a lunatic. But with today's Republican Party and the loyalty of Trump, you have no choice. You have to prove that you're over the top loyal to the king. And again, this is the model for every authoritarian history, right? From mafia bosses to fascist. And so you have to be who's loyal, who's more loyal. And it's fascinating. You're seeing it play out in all these GOP primaries across the country, where they're just eating each other alive to see who can be more crazy. I don't know if you saw it yesterday in Texas, where the congressman's resigning after winning, well, coming out on top of his race because the third place finisher outed him for having an affair. They're tearing each other apart in the goal to prove who's the most loyal and who's the most Trumpy. For me as a Democratic political consultant, it's high entertainment, but for our country, it's terrifying. Today, John Jr. once again tweeted a negative hit about our woke military. It's like, my God, our military right now is deploying to Europe to backstop our NATO allies. Russia has invaded Ukraine. They're killing people. By the way, they're doing a terrible job. They're being slaughtered. They've lost hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers, and we still have Americans, people in power, people formerly in power, essentially cheering for the Russians. It's disturbing. It's just terrifying, actually.
And you've got media figures here. I look at the Fox channel.
Yep.
In fact, I don't even really know where Tucker Carlson is at this moment. There was a pivot at one point where at the beginning, everyone was, yay, Putin. And now that you're seeing these atrocities and the world is coming together against this. Now they're going, this might be bad for us. We should probably figure out how to not be so pro-Putin.
Well, what they're trying to do is be anti-Putin and anti-Biden, right? And it's disturbing. There was a time when we rallied around the flag, where we support the president, the commander-in-chief. They want it both ways. They want to hate on Biden, but still hate on Putin. And it's an impossible needle to thread. If there ever does come the most dire situation where we do find ourselves in direct confrontation, they're really going to be in trouble. What do? Do you support the U.S. military against Putin or not? And that test is coming. I call a lot of these guys traitors a lot. I get accused of it a lot, but I'm very comfortable with that word at this point. If you are openly attacking the president of the United States while he's coordinating a huge international coalition, doing by every measure a brilliant job in a very tough circumstance, bringing folks together, bringing people who, my God, Germany's upping their budget. Trump beating those guys for years. They didn't up their budget. All it took was Joe Biden and the Russians to get that going. So just have some common sense, but there isn't. The entire party's lost their common sense. Now it's more important to own the libs. It's more important to hate on the commander in chief. Just tonight, Carlson was on there talking about, I was wrong. I was wrong. Putin's really bad. But, I think one of the reasons we were wrong is because Biden and Harris did such a terrible job leading us. It's just, it's comical. It is comical, but it's freaking mind-boggling that you could have such a broken brain where you blame the president of the United States, who's coordinating an international coalition, for you not understanding just how evil a murderous dictator was, who's invaded several countries before this and has been ruthlessly killing people for years, throwing them out of windows. So, it's exhausting. I feel, somebody asked me the other day how I feel right now. I got to tell you, I'm just freaking exhausted. I'm tired of having to say the same thing over and over. These people have given up their loyalty to the United States in the name of power, and the name of corruption. And I think that the day will come when we will find out just why these people are so compromised.
And the reality is, we brought this up earlier. The fact is Republicans don't have an agenda. They have no policy aims. They have no direction. They want pure, unadulterated power, like you said. And the reason they want that is, they want to enrich their friends and themselves, and they want all that, but they want to punish the others. They want to punish people. Look, I get the idea. We want power because we're going to make things better. We're going to go in this direction. But their idea is we're going to push back, and we're going to go after name the other group. That's what they're after.
Well, there's no interest in actually bringing America up. There's no interest in bringing America forward. It is truly about peeling off people. I don't know if you saw the picture today of the governor of Iowa signing the bill banning transgender individuals from performing in women's sports in the state. But what was shocking about it was the picture was nothing but young white women. Yeah, like literally blonde. Somebody joked on my Twitter that the diversity in the entire picture was one girl had curly hair. And this is what they're doing. It's hard not to see with your own two eyes. Something we say often at Beerhall Project is it's right there for you to see. Your own two eyes see what's happening. Stop denying what you see. When you see the governor of a state signing bills surrounded by nothing but white citizens, that's a sign. And when you see activities like these transgender activity, the anti-transgender work in Texas, it's right there. It's hatred. It's bigotry. We don't stand for anything but hating people. And that's a terrifying place to be in the United States. And we have an entire party, I believe, that's dedicated itself to doing nothing more than tearing down others for their own gain. And it's right there. I mean, literally, there was no RNC platform. Remember, the RNC platform was whatever Donald Trump wants.
Yep.
And now there is no Donald Trump. They're just nothing but anger and hatred. I'm just tired of this. I was really angry on Monday, but now I've crossed to tired.
Join the club, and this is how it's been for the last several years. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Fred Wellman. Fred's the co-founder of the Beerhall Project. You can follow him on Twitter at Beerhall Project. Also, the website beerhallproject.com.
Beerhallproject.com. Of course, my own Twitter is FP Wellman.
And we'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Now, here's one of the things that I'm looking at this moment, going, all of the news reports coming out of Ukraine are just heartbreaking and angering, and yet you've got the Fox folks, you've got the OANs, you've got all of this money that went into these places. Today, the news story that RT shut down operations here in the U.S., off in the U.K. Are we at a moment, do you think, that finally we're going to begin to investigate how much Russian money went into media communications in this country? Go back to 2014, 15, and all during then, how much went into Fox News? How much went into all of these cable channels? Because, look, I went to the conventions back in 16. I saw the outlets there and the kind of wealth that was in all of these outlets that you got like 6 followers on Twitter. How is it possible you got $50,000 worth of equipment and you're doing this for a living? Yeah. Where's this money coming from? And I don't know if we're now finding out more and more where it was coming from.
Well, exactly. And a lot of malfeasant actors. I don't know if you saw today, Steve Bannon's partner, Mr. Guo, I believe is his name. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but the Chinese gentleman who's been backing all of Steve Bannon's ventures, he's bankrupt now, unfortunately, because he's also a crook. He shut down his GTV outlet, which was a big part of Bannon's master plan, which is where they broadcast in Chinese. So a lot of these guys have been backed by some very rotten people. And yeah, we're starting to see it. I saw something fascinating too, where I don't know if you've noticed it, but the quality of my trolls is really going down. And somebody pointed out today that Dr. Oz, for example, has allegedly like 4 million followers on Twitter, but he'll put a tweet out and only get like 10 retweets in hours. Okay, that's interesting, because if you have that many followers, the pure algorithm will jam a lot of engagement. So what was the engagement? Well, the engagement was bot farms. They have these bot farms overseas, and I wonder how many of those are based in Russia, because we're not seeing the activity anymore. But I do think we're at a moment, and I think in the larger moment, not just media but in politics. I had a conversation with my friends on the Midas Touch podcast the other day about, I feel like we're at a moment. I still feel the same way 4 days later, that it's like an earthquake right now. There's a faults work. So I live in Missouri now, and the New Madrid Fault is south of St. Louis. It's quite famous. There was a huge earthquake in the 1800s that actually shifted the direction of the Mississippi River. If you look at the map of Missouri, the border between Missouri and Illinois and Tennessee actually doesn't follow the Mississippi River anymore, because the river shifted from this earthquake. And if you know how faults work, a fault, the way it works is it builds up pressure, and then it slips, and that's an earthquake. And I think it feels like in a lot of ways we may be in a moment in the middle of that slip, that the invasion of Ukraine and its ties and it exposes that larger authoritarian movement. And actually, I do compare it often to the 20s and 30s with the movement of fascism, the global fascism movement, which had parties here in the United States. They had parties in France. They didn't take power, which like they did in Germany and Italy and others, but there was a global fascist movement. I think we've seen a global authoritarian movement in the last few years, in the last 4 or 5 years, and this is that moment where for maybe I don't like to do historical comparisons, but the Sudetenland, the siege of the Sudetenland was the first move by Hitler. I think we're seeing the same kind of a movement now. Putin has made his move to take Ukraine. It's not going great, but it has exposed this global movement of who stands with who. And suddenly all these organizations and people that were able to kind of have it both ways, like you said, Fox News specifically, Tucker Carlson, Trump, had to pick a side, and they're having a hell of a time, right? I think what you're seeing is, the earthquake is shaking things up. RT going away is is very important. It'll be very interesting to see what the effects are on organizations like Fox News and others, and let's be honest, the GOP, who have really had tied themselves at the hip to these overseas authoritarians. Don't you remember freaking Tucker Carlson was supposed to broadcast in Hungary, having CPAC in Hungary, for goodness sake, in Viktor Orban's country. So that's a global authoritarian movement. So it is, I think we're faced in a moment much like, say, 1939, perhaps, where the first move has been made outwardly and the die has been cast, and how we react to it as a nation, and how our leaders react, and how the entire global the coalition, if you will, reacts to this moment will be telling. I'm cautiously optimistic, which is not a feeling I use very often anymore, but I am cautiously optimistic by seeing the way that Europe has stepped up to the plate and the way the whole world has stepped up to the plate to choke off Russia from the international scene and react to this. But I don't know. I think it's encouraging to see that we're taking it seriously. I do believe that Putin has truly overstepped he's as they say a lot, he's over the tip of his skis a little bit. But these next few weeks are going to be really interesting to see what happens. And historically, I think we're living in historic times.
Oh, absolutely. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Fred Wellman, co-founder of the Beerhall Project, beerhallproject.com, the website if you want to check that out. You got a thought, question, comment for Fred? Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. The reason I bring this up is, there was a story today that one of the ex-Fox News producers, this guy, Jack Hannock, was there at Fox News, evidently has been charged with working for a sanctioned Russian oligarch to establish television networks in Russia and in other European countries. And you go, they understand messaging. They understand it really well, especially propaganda. And I'm sure they got their ties right here, and I hope some of that comes out in this as well.
I hope so too. That's my hope. I think I said early on, I'll say it again, is after the fall of the Soviet Union, we finally had access to the archives. After East Germany fell, and we actually got into Stasi's headquarters and saw the files. We found some interesting things out, right? And I can't help but wonder what lurks in Putin's files and archives, who's been paid and who hasn't, and what the what the information they have on people is, because it's clear that there are very compromised people working in our space. Yeah. I can't wait to see the truth on Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I hate to think that Tulsi's whole story, she's just ambitious beyond measure, that she actually believes the bullshit she's selling. Oh, sorry, I did it.
You did it.
It'll beat me.
There's a quarter for the jar. But here's the thing. About that, I'm looking at this moment. I was looking at some of the stories today that I started the show off with. The fact that oligarchs in Russia have lost $80 billion. Their bathtub boats are being all confiscated up. Yesterday, one in Germany. Today, one in France. Not good for business. Their credit rating down to junk status. You got another Russian oligarch who's put $1 million bounty on Putin's head. At some point, the wealthy in that country have got to go, hey, you're killing us. You got to go. Right. And this is where...
Or even the average Russians. I mean, a ticket to St. Petersburg, from St. Petersburg to Helsinki today was $7,500 on the train. Think about that number.
Wow.
So $7,500 to take a train from St. Petersburg to Helsinki to get out of Russia before what they think is going to be martial law. So there's a lot of pain in Russia today. And you have to wonder, what will be the price for that? How long can you hold out? I don't know.
Russia is a capitalist country. Good American gouging. Look at that.
There you go. Right.
But you said a moment ago that you were guardedly optimistic, and how do you think this administration has handled thus far what's going on in Ukraine? Clearly, there was no way this was going to be stopped. And for those who keep saying, well, Joe Biden should have been tough enough, I think that's, to use a Biden word, malarkey. But I'd like to get your thought.
I'm not if you know me, I'm not a giant cheerleader. I mean, I always was uncomfortable the way people would cheerleader for Trump, but and I've been very hard on Mr. Biden in the past. I knew him when he was Senator Biden. I was in Iraq in 2005. He came over and we butted heads a little bit when we briefed him at my command, because he was still talking about the idea of splitting Iraq into 3 pieces at that point, fully 4 years after it became a sovereign nation. So obviously that wasn't an option, or 3 years. So I've not always agreed with Mr. Biden on his foreign policy picks. But if you have a moment in time where you need someone with a unique skill set like Mr. Biden at this moment, you couldn't have picked a moment. Look here. He's a senator for his whole life. He's an old school senator, and old school senators are all about coalition building, partnerships, going across the aisle, finding ways to work together quietly. There was never like a big, if you remember the old days, it wasn't one senator, it was always the Skyline Ranger, like Ted Cruz, like that. It was always, they worked together in collaboration. It was the world's greatest collaborative body, right? At one point, right? And that's what Mr. Biden grew up with. And he's not a big talker. He's more of a pick up the phone and talk. He's got a warmth about him when he talks to people. I've seen it. And that's this moment. We needed someone who could step up, build a coalition, work with allies, not Bigfoot them, not claim all the credit, put the power of the United States to action. And I give him high marks. I mean, honestly, there's just very few things I haven't seen them. There's very few things I've said, we should do this, and within a day or so it's happened, right? And so I give him high marks, and some of my, I'm not an expert on the worst in Eastern Europe. I have friends that are. What I'm seeing is as much as we can do, we're doing. We're moving troops into position. We're stepping hard on what we can do. We're sending weapons. I mean, short of direct combat, we're doing everything possible. And I got to tell you, it's good to see, because for 20 years, the global war on terror, everything we used was hammers. The only tool we had in our toolbox was hammers. It was just a matter of what size hammer. Is it a drone? Is it an entire freaking army invading? So it, to me, as an old school, I took international relations back in my undergraduate degree at West Point. It's good to see the full spectrum of what we call DIME, or diplomacy and economic sanctions, all being used in concert, as you should in international crisis. So I give them high marks. Obviously the jury's still out and the enemy gets a vote, but I do believe in my heart that they're seeing a tough time now. And then you couple that with a charismatic leader who's using modern communications very effectively, Mr. Zelensky, and you got quite the team, right? On each side of the equation. Mr. Zelensky's holding people's feet to the fire, but he's being very adept in his ability to communicate what he needs and support that he's getting. And you got Biden quietly organizing, a massive coalition. So I'm satisfied. I don't say that very often, but I think we're doing what we can do.
Yeah. Last question I got on this, because everyone wants to know when this ends. How does this end? Does this end with Putin flying out a window? Does someone take the $1 million and try and knock him off? Or do we just have no clue on how far Putin is willing to go? I mean, there have been overtures of we're going to be using nuclear weapons at some point. The thing with in Sweden the other day, where it seems like they're trying to cause some conflict elsewhere, so that they can start a broader war. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I wish I could give an answer. The thing about being a combat veteran is, I did 4 combat tours. 2 significantly, I did the Desert Storm invasion, and I also did Iraq 1. I was the OAF 1 invasion. So I've had the ignominious history of invading other countries, the same country twice. And I can honestly say that even going in with the world's greatest military at the time, I still didn't know how it was going to go, right? You just don't know. Yeah. None of us predicted how well the Ukrainians would stand up to this fight, how well they would stay organized. The fact they still don't have air superiority, so they're still putting up a fight. The information war has been stunning to watch unfold, completely unexpected in so many ways. No. So I don't have a lot of predictions. I do believe that Mr. Putin has greatly overestimated his ability to win this war. I don't think he's going to win it. I don't think there's any chance he wins it. I don't think there's any chance that Ukraine capitulates and then he gets what he wants, which is basically another province. It's simply not going to happen. And yeah. I just can't see a scenario it does. So it's a matter of how bad they bleed and how bad it hurts his dictatorship. But you're right. Good I think, stuff. But like somebody always says, I think how do authoritarians usually leave power?
Out a window.
Sometimes it's the end. Yeah, sometimes
out the window. There you go.
Sometimes it's a bunker. They don't
out the
do,
window.
Sometimes it's hanging from a bridge, right? So very rarely does an
Gotta go.
authoritarian like Mr. Putin leave policy.
There you go. Fred, I appreciate the time. Great stuff, man. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Sorry. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1893. That was the day that William Greene, longtime president of the American Federation of Labor, was born in Coshocton, Ohio. Greene's family were English and Welsh immigrant miners. He entered the mines at the age of 16. Before he was 20, he had become secretary of the Coshocton Progressive Miners Union. That local would eventually join the United Mine Workers of America. By 1906, Greene had risen to lead the Ohio chapter of the UMWA. Less than 2 decades later, when longtime leader of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, died, Greene was named his successor. Greene believed in union management cooperation. He thought labor could win more gains at the table with management than they could standing in opposition. Greene helped secure some major legislative victories for labor, including the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, which strengthened collective bargaining rights. He also supported the Fair Labor Standards Act, which established the 40-hour workweek and the minimum wage. His tenure at the helm of the AFL was during some of the most tumultuous years in U.S. labor history. This was an era of massive sit-down strikes and organizing drives for workers in industries like steel, meatpacking, and the auto industry. Greene supported organizing industrial workers, but the AFL's leadership at the time, by and large, favored skilled trade labor. Increasingly, Greene clashed with UMWA President John L. Lewis over the question of industrial unions. This led to a split in the labor movement and the formation of the separate Congress of Industrial Organizations. Greene continued to lead the AFL until his death in 1952. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Our local newspapers are being merged, purged, shrunk, shut down, and looted by Wall Street profiteers. Yet, there's good news. In the towns those media vultures are torching, a phoenix is rising. Hundreds of determined locals, often led by people of color, are finding new ways to pay for and revive top-quality local journalism. For example, the Ferndale Enterprise moved to an old Victorian home, renting upstairs rooms to vacationers to subsidize the paper. Also, while aloof Wall Street owners have no connection to us or our towns, the scrappy new community papers are stressing their grassroots connection by moving into friendlier, more central, street-level spaces such as public libraries and community centers, so that regular people can see them and have direct access to their reporters and editors. Then there's the editor of the Sahan Journal in Minneapolis, who moves his weekly editorial meeting to the offices of various grassroots groups so their members can help shape the paper's coverage. And in Marfa, Texas, the Big Bend Sentinel is literally serving the public, not only with a good weekly, but also with the Sentinel, a combo coffee shop, cozy bar, cafe, event space, and hangout for locals to meet and greet. In ways big and small, dedicated local journalists are experimenting with funding, structure, staffing, etc. to produce the news that democracy requires. Note to Wall Street vultures, these newspaper ventures aren't interested in scaling up to maximize investor profits. As they know, it was corporate cost-cutting, consolidation, and scaling that got us into today's mess of journalistic collapse. And, unlike the Wall Street model, their success is not measured simply by financial return, but also by how they do at keeping citizens informed and engaged. This is Jim Hightower saying, now that's real journalism.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. So, good numbers on the job front. If you listen to the President's State of the Union, jobs, well, if you think a president creates jobs, which, the last guy said he did, then Joe Biden is the most job-creating president we've ever had. And today's unemployment numbers that have come out, 215,000 initial new claims, the lowest total since the beginning of the year, and much less than the Wall Street estimates. So more jobs, less people collecting unemployment, economy getting better, things going well. For all of the chaos merchants and outrage folks, hard to keep complaining when things are getting better. If only we could get some policy moving to get us in that direction, well, maybe we can get some more stuff done. Now, all I heard is inflation 7.5%, inflation 7.5%. And yeah, inflation's a problem. We got things to deal with. And I think the president talked about that in the State of the Union, how he has a plan that, understand, not one Republican is going to help with. But at least we're not Turkey, because Turkey on inflation hit 54%. That is the fastest rise in 20 years there. The lira tumbled, food and energy prices through the roof. People not happy there in Turkey. Now, look, if we had 54% inflation here, yeah, then I'm calling for something on a stick too. But 7.5, I don't know. Now, here's something that I had a listener send me this article. I don't watch The View. Don't necessarily like The View. Literally can't tolerate getting through an episode. But they had Michelle Tafoya on. And now Michelle's gotten a bunch of attention. There were some racist comments that came out. There's some right-wing stuff, because the rumor is she's going to be running for Senate somewhere, maybe Minnesota possibly, not sure. But she's on The View, raise her profile, get some of her right-wingery out there. And this is one of those moments where you go, even the blind squirrel finds a nut occasionally. Because she was talking about, what's going on with the economy. And she was saying that, China is something to look out for. And she said that, and this is where, I agree with her. I know this is hard to believe, but I agree with her. She said, I went through my closets about 3 months ago, and I went through everything that was made in China, and I took it out. Because we don't know we don't know anything. They use slave labor over there. It's awful. They torture their workers. It's genocide. And Joy Behar jumps in, well, they're paid. I think they're paid. And I'm going, whoa. The Uyghur thing, been out there a while. I would think you should know that. But for me, this is one of those moments. I don't like Michelle Tafoya. Would probably anything coming out of her mouth, I'm expecting I'm going to be against. This seems like one of those moments where just because she took one side, the other people had to take the other. And immediately, you're not listening to each other. You're just, I'm taking the other side. And this happens a lot. And this is a learning moment, I hope. Tafoya goes on and says, no, they use slave labor there. You don't know, so I took everything from my closet that was made in China, and I had half a closet left. It was just a massive pile, and I'm not doing this anymore. And Whoopi Goldberg jumped in. She raised a complaint, jumped in, and that said, it's because Americans don't want to pay the prices. They don't want to pay the labor costs that it costs to make things here. This is that. And then the other person jumps in, says, hey, it's corporate America's fault, and just all back and forth. And here's the reality. The issue isn't an either or. The issue should be a both. The issue should be a, hey, China is our adversary. This whole we can hold hands and kumbaya ain't happening. They are literally eating our lunch. Some of our inflation problems are we're not getting the things that we need to get done. We have supply chain issues because we don't make it here anymore. This is one of those moments. And this is where I call to everybody. I don't care your political stripe. When you sit and you talk about manufacturing, you sit and talk about, from a national security standpoint. Look, we are on the brink of World War III, whether you like to believe it or not. We're on the brink. Because what happens? What happens if Russia does roll over Ukraine? What happens if, well, they get bogged down and they need popular support back home and they end up, invading a NATO country? And now we're pulled into a global conflict. Do we have the ability to produce the things that we need? Now, the president did talk about in the State of the Union about the Berry Amendment and how we need to go back, and every administration does this, but they're actually going to do it. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see the factories come back, when I see the manufacturing jobs come back. Now, to Whoopi's point, nobody wants to pay the prices. I don't mind paying a little bit extra if I know something was made in the U.S. I want to have that option. The sad reality is, in this day and age, and you can go check your closets, you can go check your stores, there are no choices, because those American companies, those American workers, they're gone. I would love to be able to go, okay, I'm going to go and there's a hammer on the shelf. There's one made in the U.S. for $5. There's one for $4 made in China. I'll pay the extra buck. Or, look, there's for $25 or $20. I'll pay the extra $5 to buy an American-made hammer because I know it's probably going to be made well. Because I know I've had such horrible luck with all of the things that I get from China. And the reason I bring that up is the story that made me laugh today. And I know war is not funny. I know there's nothing comical about it. But the story that I saw was the reason that the Russian convoy is breaking down is, one, their equipment is older and it's breaking down because this is heavy stress. Two, you've got some people who are surrendering and saying, screw this, we're not going to go kill people who speak our language and look like us. But three, Chinese knockoff tires that are just crap, that can't get out of the mud. They're not the Michelin, the big name, the good tires that we use. No, they're the cheap knockoffs. That, and look, I'm not the expert. This is what this guy in this article was saying, and he was showing you pictures of these big, heavy Russian vehicles stuck in the mud. They're literally stuck in the mud. These are vehicles that are supposed to be able to go through this stuff with the tires to get them out. So, and it was the perfect kind of scenario for me. Because, I remember a time when you bought something, it was a quality product. Now everything's a cheap knockoff because, hey, we need cheaper prices. Everything seems to be about hyper consumption of cheaper products. So, okay, we got a whole bunch of cheap crap and it breaks almost immediately. We now build things for planned obsolescence. So we're spending a whole bunch of money time and time again, to keep having the same things over and over again, where we could have bought one decent quality item and it would have lasted. And maybe we'd have fixed it. I know, figure that one out. It's like we have, I keep using the washing machine. We had our washer fixed, a while ago. And the guy came out and said, it'd probably have been cheaper just to go buy a new one. That's what everyone else does. And you go, but we don't fix things anymore. We just throw them out. That's what this stuff's made for. And I don't know that that's a good place to be. But I thought it was interesting that the Russians can't seem to get to the battlefront because, you know what? They're literally stuck in the mud. But back to this Tafoya thing. If we, you, me, us, started saying, no, we demand American-made products. If we, demanded our politicians push for better country of origin labeling. I don't know, if we, you and me, the voters, if we demanded our politicians say, you know what, Amazon or whatever website you purchase things from, you got to have an American-made option. Put it in a filter, put it on the front page, and by the way, you got to say where it's coming from too. This is a way forward. And this is where I'm going to agree with Tafoya, because I think what we're seeing right before our very eyes is the Republican Party trying to figure out how to pivot away from being the party of corporate America. Now, they're still going to take their cash and still going to do all of their bidding and make sure that they're deregulated and they don't have to worry about paying taxes or any of that stuff. But the rhetoric, because they've learned that we don't really pay attention to what they say. We just want to make sure they're loud and outraged and shouting like Maria Bartiromo. I don't know when she morphed into Janine Pirro, but that screaming kind of delivery, that weird, wow, what happened to you? What's in the water there? Is all that seems to matter. And I guess that's the model. I guess if you scream it loud enough, people are going to believe it because you sound authoritative. You sound like you know what you're talking about. It's kind of interesting. But I look at this moment, and maybe if we got people elected to office who are concerned about, I don't know, our backyard, concerned about our jobs, the future of our country, our children, manufacturing here. Because if you're looking at, if you sit and you look at where we've been for the last 2 years, the pandemic, the supply chain issues, what's going on in Ukraine, now more than ever, you need to think national security-wise of domestic production. That is not difficult to figure out. Not hard at all. Most certainly something we do. And you know what would happen? Those poor communities, those rural communities, places like where I live, they would be thriving again. The reason that I believe that the right got so much attention is people were hurting. And there weren't enough people paying attention to help. And this has been my knock against the Democrats for a very long time. You lost that mantle of the party of the working class. And the Republicans, they smell that. And this is them attempting to make that pivot. To say, oh yeah, okay, well we gave corporate America all the money to leave. Yeah, we gave them the tax breaks to move overseas. Yeah, we gave them the tax breaks to be able to hand more to their CEOs. Yeah, we gave them the territorial tax in the Trump tax bill, so they don't have to pay taxes back here in the U.S. Yeah, we did all that stuff, but forget that. Forget that. Ignore that ever happened. We now care about you because now we're anti-China. Watch this. It's coming more and more. Same thing on the pharmaceutical companies. All of them are anti-pharmaceutical company now because of the vaccines more than ever. But now they're saying, oh, we should be able to sue pharmaceutical companies, and oh, we should be able to do all this stuff. And we should be able to, yes, because they're trying to pivot away from where they've been for decades, which is defending these people, defending their profits. And look, now that they're here, how about we pass some legislation to ensure that Medicare gets to negotiate for prescription drug prices? There's a thought. Instead of saying, we're Americans, damn it, we pay full price. Because that's what Bush did to us. Got to fatten those profits. Got to make sure that they're there. It's literally insane what we've allowed to have happen. It's literally insane what we've let them get away with. So I'm at this point where, and I've been saying this for a while, it's not so much right versus left as it is up versus down, as it's the wealthy versus everyone else. And I'm hoping this, and I think Fred Wellman hit on it a little bit. I'm hoping what's going on in Ukraine right now pulls us somewhere back together. I'm hoping it pulls us somewhere back together and saying, look, we'd better unite. We'd better figure this out. The weird thing, and this is one of those really bizarre stories that I find just literally comical, but somewhat useful to this point. Paul LePage, you may remember him as the former governor of Maine. Paul LePage was a guy who used to joke and took such great joy out of the fact that he used to steal Halloween candy from children. Yeah, that Paul LePage. very, very, very proud of himself that he would steal children's Halloween candy. He made headlines today in that he's saying things have gotten bad. He's saying that he has changed. He's changed. He's no longer that bombastic loudmouth. He's no longer the Trump guy. He's no longer the divisive guy. He thinks, gotta start changing. He's running for governor again, which is interesting, kind of, timing-wise, to have his grand transition. But he said, quote, "The big change in me has been the last 4 years watching what's going on in the country." He said, "I'm absolutely convinced that if we continue to hate each other, if we don't find a path to at least like each other and respect each other, our country is in for doom. Our Constitution will not survive. We need to find a path to have civil discourse so we can talk both sides of the argument." And I agree with that. Who would have thought that I would have agreed with Paul LePage, the guy who stole candy from children? But here again, who would have told me, if you'd have told me back in 2010, 11, 12, that I would call Joe Walsh, the former congressman from Illinois, a friend and someone that I have civil, reasonable conversations with, I'd have thought you were crazy. But things can happen. Most certainly things can happen. I'm going to take a quick break right here. Come back on the other side to wrap things up. Take your calls, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. If you're just joining us, make sure you download the podcast. If you've missed anything, have the program with you wherever you go, wherever you get your podcasts there, or just go to thericksmithshow.com and get it there. Quick break. Back after this. Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. National headlines spread fear of the growing wildcat strikes at Chrysler and Briggs auto plants in Detroit. The wildcats had increased to 35,000 strikers and idled workers at 2 Chrysler plants and 7 Briggs plants. The strike wave started a week earlier at the Dodge main plant in Detroit. 8 of the union's best leaders had been discharged for refusing to go along with a production line speed-up. Briggs management followed Chrysler's union-busting campaign by firing 7 UAW officers at the Mack Avenue plant. 3 days later, Briggs fired another 8 committeemen and stewards, which then provoked the walkout. Company officials and the War Labor Board were outraged at the halt in war production of tanks, B-29 Super Fortresses, anti-aircraft guns, rockets, and trucks. The Michigan legislature introduced a bill to define as a felony any strike participation that violated a labor relations contract. The War Labor Board demanded that both sides meet in Washington to end the walkout. Strike leaders defied the wartime no-strike pledge and ignored the International's threat of disciplinary action. Strikers had the full backing of local UAW presidents. The UAW conceded that management had provoked the wildcatting through indiscriminate firings. Workers argued that if the War Labor Board prioritized production over union busting, they would order the reinstatement of all the discharged leaders. The Flint Labor Council passed a resolution demanding that all CIO and other union representatives resign immediately from the War Labor Board. It considered the board as stacked against labor. Workers at Chrysler and Briggs would soon end their walkout with guarantees of arbitration for reinstatement of the fired militants. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind. Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Let's go to the phone lines. Got Eric on line 1 listening in Minneapolis on KTNF AM 950. Eric, thanks for taking time for us. What's on your mind, buddy?
Brother Rick, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. How are you tonight?
Oh, super fine. So, no, just wanted to add that like you said, the Republicans are trying to distance themselves. They're trying to make themselves the party of the working class, but I'm not buying it because they're going to make that big sell. They're trying to kind of lay the groundwork. But you know, and I know, and I'm telling everybody that I know, hey, if you can claim you're for us, there's only one party that does, and that's the Democrats. They at least give lip service. You guys need to deliver, because right now, as it stands, the one party, let's say, that can do something that isn't, let's say, inept, that everybody wants to call the Democrats, they can coalesce together and get this stuff done. They don't have a problem with that, but they don't want to do it. And that's just an ironclad fact. I mean, like right here now where I am in Minnesota, we got a big budget, we got a big budget surplus, and it's what to do with it. The one thing I haven't heard from state Republicans here, why don't we put those into the bridges? Why don't we put those into the roads? I wouldn't care about paying as much or a little bit more taxes if people cleaned up the streets. But then, because I don't know if you remember that the I-35 bridge.
Yep.
I don't want another I-35 bridge problem. And I don't think the bridges have been upgraded from their, I think, D rating that they've had for, I think, the longest time. It's like, we're on borrowed time here, guys. And we want to do what? Cut more taxes for businesses, which, again, you guys don't want to pay them anyway. But then you watch everything start to deteriorate and then wonder why, oh, gee, yeah, we can't. Well, no kidding, because, when you starve it and you wonder why it can't perform, is it any wonder? And no, I'm not buying it.
No, I mean, the Republican ideology of give everything to the rich people and maybe something will trickle down to us hasn't worked, and the disinvestment has caused us major problems. And the bridges, it's just not in Minneapolis. It's all across this country. And you're right, the American Society of Civil Engineers did give us that whopping D+. They don't like giving that D+ out very often. But, we got the plus, and that's, I guess, that's something, right?
Yeah, something. I mean, I don't know what it is, but it is definitely something. It's like, guys, come on. I mean, hey, you got to choose between somebody, and I ain't choosing you until you deliver. Talk is cheap. They seem to deliver for the people that they want to deliver for, and that's a fact. Like with the Trump tax cut, the tax bill. Why when it comes time for us, now all of a sudden the checkbook dries up?
It's always pie in the sky. There'll be pie in the sky. Eric, I appreciate the thoughts, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, no kidding.
Good stuff.
Take care.
Good stuff, brother. Appreciate it. No, I mean, he's right. I mean, the fact that Biden, and the Democrats got pushed through that bipartisan bill, that was something. Not nearly enough. $1.2 trillion, not nearly enough. As I said before, back in 2020, the American Society of Civil Engineers said we needed $3.6 trillion just to get to even. We're probably up to about almost $4.5 trillion now. So that 1.2, about a quarter, maybe 30% of what we need. Good start. Something to be proud of, something to work for, to be happy with. But we still have so much to do after decades of Republican disinvestment. He is so spot on. It's mind-blowing because we got so much to do. There's so much work that has to be done. And this is a time where I'm hoping, look, the roads, they're not Republican or Democrat roads. That's how you get to work. That's how businesses get their stuff back and forth. We should be doing tons of stuff. And look, hopefully we will be. Just one of those things. I appreciate the call, Eric. But for me, when Republicans are making this pivot, and this is the question that you ask, show me the legislation. Show me the policy that you're pushing. Show me what it is. And I've been doing this for years. All 16 plus years, almost 17 years of doing this program, I've asked repeatedly, find me a piece of legislation that the Republicans have put forth that has solely benefited working people. Not something that they had to get a pound of flesh for corporate America, but solely benefiting working people. And there isn't anyone. No one's come up with it. No one will, because it ain't there. It's that simple. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast. Make sure you download the podcast, share it with your friends, especially your Trumpy friends. They need to hear things too. If you got any thoughts, questions, comments, by all means, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I answer all emails personally. And follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of that stuff. Like, subscribe, share. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people